Hi, welcome to chapter 2. We are now going to talk about genetics. Okay, so let's get to the next slide. Okay, so first we have to talk about what we are made of, right? Before we start getting into prenatal development and all of our age groups. So we're made up of trillions of cells. And I know that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, but each of those cells has a nucleus, which is in the center of the cell. And within that are chromosomes. Now, the job of chromosomes is to not only store our genetic information or our DNA, but to also transmit that genetic information to other chromosomes so that we can continue to grow as we get older. So, more about chromosomes. We get 23 matching pairs. So, we get one whole set of 23 from our mother, another whole set of 23 from our father. So, when they come together to form a new organism, we have 46 total chromosomes. Now, again, what are chromosomes made of? They're made up of DNA, and along the DNA are segments called genes. And genes are responsible for a lot of how we look, how we behave. Some are dominant, some are recessive, but we have about 20 to 25,000 genes that make us a human being. So, phenotypes and genotypes. Phenotypes are things that we can see. Genotypes are things that could only be discovered by a biological test or a DNA test. So, genotypes are the gene responsible for the color of your eyes, the gene responsible for your hair color. We can't see that outright. Again, we'd have to do some kind of genetic testing to find out which specific gene is responsible for what. But on the phenotype side, we can see the expression of the gene, right? We can see the eye color, we can see hair color. So maybe at the bottom there on the left, you recognize that from biology, right? So the big B, little b, those are the genotypes. But what we actually see and what is expressed is either brown eyes or blue eyes. So as I mentioned, some genes are dominant, which means that they will cause issues with the child. Others are recessive, meaning they will carry that gene, but it might not ever express itself. So, what are things that I'm talking about are disabilities, diseases, and even physical traits that, again, might be dominant or recessive. So here's an example. We don't talk a lot about PKU, it's a developmental issue, but look at what's going on here, right? So the mother's a carrier and the father's a carrier. Well, they have one child who does not get that gene at all, two children who become carriers of the gene, and one child who gets that dominant gene and ends up having PKU. So again, that's why you might wonder, why do I look very similar to my dad or my mom? They have different dominant genes and different recessive genes. Sorry, it's frozen here. There we go. There's a video on Blackboard for you about twins who look genetically different. They're not identical twins, but again, they were born at the same time from the same mother, same father, and have completely different expression of their genes. So I welcome you guys to watch this video clip on Blackboard. Okay, now let's talk about duplicating our DNA. So that process is called mitosis, and we will talk about mitosis and meiosis. So a student a long time ago told me a saying to keep them separate. Mitosis for my toes, meiosis for my ovaries. So the toes meaning toenails, fingernails, your hair, all of that goes through simple DNA duplication, where the chromosomes come to the center, copy themselves, and form an identical cell. So here is a picture of that. Again, all of the chromosomes are brought to the middle, and then it splits and creates two identical clusters of cells. So if you scratch your arm and dead skin cells come off, your body is going to go through mitosis to create an identical cell that will replace the one that was discarded. Okay, so that again is fingernails, toenails, our skin, all of our basics. Well, meiosis is the process of developing our sex cells. And sex cells can also be called gametes, which is the sperm and the ovum. So each gamete only contains 23 chromosomes. We talked about that a few slides ago, right? Mom will have 23, dad will have 23, and they'll come together to form a new organism. Again, gametes are formed through meiosis, and then soon we'll be talking about zygotes and going into prenatal development, which happens when we have a new organism. Okay, so the meiosis process you can see with sperm, it ends up producing thousands, millions of viable sperm. For the egg production, it really only produces one good egg as it goes through meiosis. Now think about, when do we go through meiosis? Well, men don't go through meiosis until they hit puberty, right? And then they start developing sperm. The eggs, though, have already been developed before a woman is even born. So in the womb, they develop all of the eggs that they're ever going to have. And then during puberty is when they start to release the egg. Now, another interesting thing is the egg is the largest cell in the body, the sperm is the smallest cell in the body, and when they come together and fertilize, they become a zygote. Okay, so the first 22 of the 23 pairs of chromosomes are autosomes, but that last pair is what actually determines the sex of the child. So it's called a sex chromosome. A female will be XX, a male will be XY. And what we understand is that the mother passes the X down to the child no matter what, but it's actually the father who determines the sex of the baby by either producing an X or a Y for either a female or a male. Now, twins. So we see identical twins on the right. Those are actually my sons. They're identical twins. And that's when one zygote was formed but split into two identical clusters of cells. So my sons have the exact same genotypes, they have the exact same DNA, but their phenotypes might be different because maybe they were expressed in different ways. Fraternal twins are different. They're genetically no more alike than non-twin siblings, meaning they are two separate eggs, two separate sperm, but they happen to grow in the womb at the same time. But other than that, they really don't share any other genetic information. They're just like any other siblings, but they're born at the same time and are the same age. Now, I have a picture here of a boy and a girl. Can they be identical twins? Can a boy and a girl be identical twins? I've had some parents tell me that before. Is that accurate? Well, no, right? If you're an identical twin, you would have the exact same sex chromosome. So a male and a female cannot be identical twins. Their sex chromosome is different. Okay? Now, this is just a little bit speeding forward. That's me and my sons there when they graduated. They're now going to be 21. But did you ever know that the Olsen twins from Full House were actually fraternal twins? Again, two sisters from two different eggs and two different sperm, but were in the womb at the same time, born at the same time, and as we can see, really passed off as identical twins and made themselves, I think, billionaires. So, just an interesting tidbit. Okay, so what about twinning, right? You hear that it might be in the family. They do have, maternal factors related to fraternal twinning, your age. There's all these different things, right? You might also be a hyperovulator who ovulates more than one egg when we go through our cycle. So identical twins can also be in families. There's been lots. It's hard necessarily to find the direct link, but they do find that twinning, both fraternal and identical, do are popular within families. Okay, so there's a fertilization video on Blackboard for you to watch. It'll kind of review what we've been talking about in terms of cells and chromosomes and give you a little bit more background. So please watch that video on Blackboard. All right, so sometimes we have chromosomal abnormalities, And what happens is it ends up causing serious developmental issues. It can be physical and or mental or both. So what they believe is that during meiosis, for some reason the chromosome didn't break off properly. And sometimes it breaks off or it creates an additional one. Well, what that most commonly leads to is Down syndrome. So Down syndrome occurs in one out of every 1,000 live births, and it's that 21st pair of chromosomes. So many times they call it trisomy 21 because you'll get three of those chromosomes instead of two, which we should be getting one from mom, one from dad. Somehow they end up with a third. Well, what that ends up leading to is memory and speech issues, vocabulary, slow motor development, and what's really interesting is the distinct physical features, right? You can see it in a child with Down syndrome. And what's interesting is it's similar across cultures. And that just shows how connected we are in terms of our DNA and our genes. Even across cultures, Down syndrome comes out in a similar way when a child is born. So, the risk of Down syndrome and any other chromosomal abnormalities increase as the mother gets older. So, you can see the cases are really low in young mothers, but by the time you get up to between 45 and 50, it's one out of 11, children. So, that's a big proportion compared to a younger mother, which is why they do warn that that could be an issue if you get pregnant at an older age. So here are other sex chromosome disorders. So remember that sex chromosome is that 23rd pair. So you normally wouldn't even know something was going on until adolescence because puberty starts to kick in or maybe doesn't kick in and would show that maybe something is going on. So they have XYY syndrome. This actually happens in one out of 1,000 male births. So that tells you how common it is. But it needs no treatment. Well, why? They have an extra Y chromosome. Well, that leads to above average height, large teeth, severe acne, but their intelligence, sexual development, and fertility are normal. So again, there's no treatment needed because nothing would really come up as needing treatment. But triple X, Klinefelter syndrome, Turner syndrome, those lead to more severe issues. Again, that addition or subtraction of a chromosome, especially the sex chromosome, can lead to a lot of fertility issues, needing hormone therapy, and having issues at puberty. Okay. Now, reproductive technologies, again, sometimes people struggle with fertility issues or make a decision that they want to adopt. So, if they want to go the fertility route, they can have donor insemination, or if they're able to, with their partner, create their own embryo, they could have that in vitro fertilized. Again, there's concerns with that, but many people do that, and that's how they have their children. There's also surrogate motherhood. Again, there's moral questions about giving money to someone to bear a child, but again, it happens and it works for many people. Now, adoption, again, it could be choosing not to or not being able to have biological children. Now, what they do show is some adopted children show more learning and emotional issues, maybe from the stress of the early relationships with their biological parents. They tend to be, less alike, not only in looks, but many times in personality and intelligence. And the age of adoption, of course, can bring a lot of questions for the child. So they do find that with sensitive caregiving and open communication, children who are adopted can fare well, but again, they need parents who are understanding of their situation. Thank you for following along with Chapter 2. Please check in with Blackboard and watch the supplemental videos. Thank you.